Hi, I'm Kyle.
And I'm Zack.
And this is Those Who Conspire. Welcome, everyone, to a very special edition of Those Who Conspire. I am honored to be joining you as the co-host and co-ringleader of this ramshackle operation that we have today. You can't even imagine the number of things that have fallen apart to get us to this point. And we'll go over them very briefly. But for those of you who are just turning in for the first time, I am Kyle Moody, joined as always by my lovely friend and co-host, Zack Hightower, who is also going to be referred to as Zachary Taylor Thomas for the remainder of this pod.
What? That was a weird thing to throw in there while I was taking a drink. Zachary Taylor, I'm ZTT? What the hell is that?
It's the only way I can describe it, Zack. The amount of things that have gone wrong. Your internet died. Your computer died. Your router and internet died at the same time in a California earthquake. And then, apropos of nowhere, two versions of you started popping up, one of which you typed as the Phantom for this podcast.
Yeah.
This was incredible. Folks, it's very appropriate that Zack brings in the Phantom and that we're talking about the Mothman today, because this begins our series called Spooktober. Here, during the entire month of October, Those Who Conspire is going to be looking at horror-based or adjacent conspiracies to really help celebrate the witching month. No, I also wanted to take this time to say that we are also not alone here. You might have heard a disembodied third voice, and that's not Zack's digital counterpart that's coming in. I'd like to introduce you to our guest today. He's a fellow podcast host. He's the designer responsible for our logo. He's a beer geek, all-around nerd, and co-host of the Stories Unroll'd podcast. Please allow us to introduce Ryan Normile. Ryan, how are you doing?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you guys so much for having me on. It felt really good to block out my morning for something so ridiculous.
Welcome to my life.
So, Ryan, how are you doing as a fellow New Englander?
It is raining right now where I am in gloomy Gardner, Massachusetts, but honestly, the leaves are starting to change. Things are getting a little bit more spooky as October approaches, but you can't really beat an autumn in New England, honestly.
This is the type of positive energy and the good thinking that brought us to get you to this pod. And we are going to beat it out of you over the next episode as we talk about one of Zack's favorite conspiracies. Zack, let's talk about the Mothman. What is the Mothman to you, ZTT?
Look, I don't understand that. No, it's fine.
It was when you glitched out.
Yeah.
The Mothman is about 7 feet tall, right? He's like a humanoid monster. He's like a cross between a man and an owl. He's got a 10 to 15 foot wingspan. He weighs about 250 pounds. Dark hair, eyes glow red.
You just described both the Mothman and Gene Simmons.
Yes!
Yeah.
So, Mothman, by eyewitness accounts, has been described as a 6 to 10 foot tall humanoid creature with a hulking 10-foot wingspan. Most notably, across all eyewitness accounts, people see his big red glowing eyes. It's like the most striking feature about him. But yeah, a lot of people speculate what he is, what he could be, and there's a labyrinthine tale to tell around Mothman.
What is this tale? Because I'm coming in as somebody that had to be coerced into this episode, so you have to hook me into it.
Coerced is a real hard way of saying I announced it live on air and he can't go back on it.
Exactly.
The cool thing about the Mothman is that it's theorized that he actually precedes tragedies, right? He's a little psychic. He also can cause like weird phone calls and stuff. And it is reported that people that saw Mothman and talked about it were visited by the Men in Black, which we're going to get into in a future episode because I'm very excited about that.
Oh my gosh. You two are nuts.
You're tickling me so delightfully right now. This is excellent.
Which is exactly what you should hear in an audio podcast, but continue.
So, as Zack alluded to, back in the 1960s, there was a lot of strange goings-on in Appalachia, most notably West Virginia. Back in 1966, on November 12th, in Clendenin, West Virginia, 5 young men were digging a grave by moonlight, and all of a sudden, a shadow covered up that moonlight. When they looked up, they saw a strange humanoid figure flying overhead by the tree line. Kind of weird. Could be written off as like an owl or something.
Why were they digging a grave in the middle of the night? That seems like a part of the story that I need explained. Because that's a red flag, right?
Yeah, I suppose it's a red flag. I think, as I guess I didn't dig deep enough into it. I just assumed they were like grave diggers, but perhaps not.
I mean, okay, that makes sense. All right, please continue.
But days later, some young folks were hanging out in an area of West Virginia known as the TNT area, which now is known as the McClintock Wildlife Reserve, but it used to be a old World War II munitions factory and also nuclear waste dump. There were 2 couples doing whatever couples do at night in an old abandoned factory area in 1966. And when they got in their car, they reported being chased by what they described as a large winged creature with bright red eyes. One of the witnesses said the creature's wings were flapping against the hood of the car, and no matter how hard they tried to outrun the creature in the car, they couldn't. They said they saw the creature fly at what they called incalculable speeds. So,
you know what? My favorite part about that story is that when they actually, like, the Mothman stops, like, hunting them once they reach the town, right? So they pull up and they are like, we're going to tell the cops. And then the husband of, like, Linda, who was one of the people that saw these people, the husband was like, well, the cop's not going to believe us. Well, why don't we just go back and see if it's still there? And they all went, okay. And I'm just like, what? Who does that? So they went back, and it was still there, which is also creepy as shit. They've also found a dead dog, which, I don't know, they may have just hit it on the way out and not wanted to say anything and created the whole Mothman story to cover it up. But you never know.
Yeah, there's plausible deniability.
So yeah. What about this Point Pleasant Silver Bridge? Because first of all, you actually inspired me to look up further information about this. So kudos to you. You've broken through this cold Kentucky to Massachusetts heart. So now, tell me a little bit more about the Mothman as a bad omen. What happened at the Point Pleasant Silver Bridge?
Well, the Point Pleasant Silver Bridge, it collapsed actually in, I want to say, it's December 15th, 1967. And it was during a traffic jam, and 46 people actually died from it. And two bodies were never recovered. But the Mothman was seen around the bridge before it collapsed. And this was actually at the end of hundreds and hundreds. I mean, more than about 100 Mothman sightings in the small town over the course of a year. And it wasn't even the first ones that the couple that we just talked about had.
The man who later went on to write the Mothman Prophecy book, a man by the name of John Keel, stated that after December 15th and the Point Pleasant Silver Bridge collapsed, there were not very many Mothman sightings, especially in that area after that. So he coined that the Mothman was actually a harbinger of death, someone who kind of predicted these bad omens and would show up at sites where there would be disaster. And that's not exactly where that theory ended, because the Mothman was also, throughout the rest of human history up until today, seen at places like Chernobyl, right before the nuclear collapse happened, and 2011, right before the tsunami in Japan, and even as close as the swine flu in Mexico in 2009.
That is wild. Okay. Now I'm intrigued. This is spooky.
Yeah, it is. It's so much fun. It's some dark shit.
God.
The coolest thing about the Mothman is that, like, people that have seen them. So here's the thing. I know your first thought is like, it's probably an owl, right? Everyone says it's like a barn owl. It's a barn owl. It's a barn owl. Here's the thing, though. Linda, like the woman from the story that we told at the very beginning, of the 4 teenagers in the car, they were praying at night as they do. And anyways, Linda later, when they went home, they were all so freaked out, right, that they all stayed in the trailer all night long with the lights on because they didn't want to be alone, which is whatever. So For like a month after, they kept hearing like garbled sounds outside of their trailer, and like they kept hearing sounds like a sped up phonograph, and they would leave the trailer and walk around it, and they couldn't find anything. Literally anything, but they still heard it. So after doing this for about 2.5 to 3 weeks, they were like, nope, we're out. So they moved in with Linda's parents, right? And they moved into the basement. And they continued to hear those noises there. They said lights would come on randomly throughout the house, because that's the thing about the Mothman. Just seeing the Mothman doesn't exactly, that's only like a part of the story. It's the fact that it haunts you. It's like having a poltergeist. It's crazy. So Linda one night was laying in bed with her aunt, who was also in the room, and their 5-month-old child, and she woke up and she saw like a dark figure in the room with her. And according to her, and this is a police report that she actually placed, he was standing there and he was wearing a black and white checkered shirt, black pants, black hair, and it was just staring at her. And she was numb and she couldn't move. And I know what you're thinking, night terrors. Just let me finish. So the man was like, I'm chill. So, not asking if he could smoke first, because he should have done that, he brought out a lighter and lit a cigarette, right? So it kind of lit up his face for a split second. But the crazy thing is that the light reflected off of a cross behind her, and Linda and then the guy immediately looked up and saw the light reflect off the cross, and she turned to see it, and when she turned back, he was gone. And she just thought, I was dreaming, whatever. The next day, her aunt told her she had the exact same dream, which is so creepy and so good.
It's so good.
I mean, it's fine. I mean, it's pretty good for what you're looking at right here, as I tried to deflate this a little bit, too. So you have some more of these stories that really drive the Mothman and his legacy?
I'm looking around. I took a bunch of notes because I'm, as a former student of Kyle's, this is the craziest thing him and I have ever done in tandem with each other.
It's true.
So
it's true.
Yeah.
Wait, how was Kyle as a professor? How was Kyle as a professor?
Well, Our bond was formed over, I think I made a Get Up Kids reference in, like, a paper or something, and it was unbreakable from the time going forward.
Yeah, anytime a student wants to do well by me, just have to mention something to write home about. The 22-year-old incredible Kansas emo album, and you are just in my good books, okay? That's it. Listeners of our show, just go, don't worry, I'll catch you, is my motto whenever it comes to our conspiracies.
That was also actually the Mothman's motto.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
There's room to believe, Zack. Out of sight, out of mind, out of reach. But let's start over. So let's talk a little bit about the fact that the Mothman is a local legend, okay? He's local in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and very specifically, he appears to be a driver of the economy there. So there's a Mothman museum. And so if you're out in the West Virginia area, head out there. There are books that have been written about it. There's a 2002 movie with Richard Gere that's focused on the Mothman. Why does the Mothman then endure, is the question that I want to ask you.
So it's kind of interesting because I was also, in part of my research of this, I was looking at specifically the Silver Bridge incident and how, yes, the Mothman has become a point of tourism, but the incident became more about the Mothman, the cryptid, the folklore, and less about the tragedy. So there's a large part of tourism that focuses towards the folklore, which is, great for the local economy. But from reading, I saw that there were, locals who are kind of put off by the whole legend, seeing as though, even though the tragedy was 50 odd years ago, it's, still something that shook the community, like, forever, It's something that will go down in their rap sheet of horrible things that have happened in Point Pleasant, even stretching to Native American history. So the Mothman endures a lot of cultural significance as well. Coming from that, the Mothman prophecy movie, there's a lot that stems off of that, that also ties into more folklore that comes from that Appalachian legend of the 1960s. And, I mean, how cool is it that Point Pleasant has a Mothman statue? I remember back in, 2020, where everything was bad and continues to be bad here in 2021, when all the Confederate statues were being pushed to be torn down. A lot of people were campaigning for them to be replaced with Mothman statues. So, I mean, that's all good, too.
I'm a fan of replacing scary icons with other scary but Kiss-adjacent icons. I think that's what we should do. Having watched Dazed and Confused again recently, I think that it's a capital idea.
Ryan talked briefly about the TNT area, right? But the problem is that in May 2010, one of the storage containers that are out there, because right now there's still all that crap is still stored out there, right? They're still storing like munitions and things like that. But they're like they were in what this one author called igloos, kind of, or like they're earth igloos. They look kind of like hobbit houses where they're just kind of built into the side of a mountain, right? But anyways, so the cool thing is that according to him, he said in May 2010, one of these igloos containing 20,000 pounds of unstable materials suddenly exploded, and nobody was injured. But they also found out that it was leaking like radiation and poisonous things into the ground, and has been since that period of time of World War II. So my theory is a human and an owl got irradiated together and became one.
That's not bad. I like that.
You don't have to
theory
lie
a
to
lot.
me. It's okay. You don't have to lie.
No,
Kyle's face says it all. He's just like,
This is basically me as an instructor. Like, Brian's over here coming in and bringing the game, like, right there, too, which is one of the things that also you do regularly, Zach, and you're doing this right here. But, like, I have trouble with human-owl radiation bestiality as a sort of origin story for the Mothman. Like, why do we call him the Mothman?
That sounds like a personal problem. I don't know about that.
All right, so I apologize for being skeptical of interspecies conjoining, for lack of a better term.
Wait a minute, hold on a second. So the Mothman's actually been seen in other places except for Point Pleasant, right? And actually in places pretty recently. There was a sighting in Chicago where somebody saw the Mothman at the airport, right? And there was also a sighting in 2006 in Wisconsin. This guy was driving with his son, and the Mothman started, like, hitting over the top of the thing and stuff like that. Like the car, he was hitting the roof of the car. And they said that they were really freaked out, and they were trying to get away from it. But just like the first story, no matter how fast they went, it was still there. And they said it hung in front of the car for a second and then just shot up, right?
Shot straight into the air. Like,
yeah. And that's like a common thing that people say about the Mothman, is that when they see him flying around, it can just change directions like that. And that's insane. Like, I don't know a bird that can do that. You know, I mean, maybe. Do I know a bird that can do that? I don't know anything about birds.
All right, well, this is not going to be a Kestrel pod, but this is going to be something that we throw in later on. I am curious, though. So, the Mothman is supposed to show up as a portent of doom. It portends this idea that something bad is about to happen. But what happened in Chicago at the sighting? Or what happened in Wisconsin afterwards? We're talking about seeing a Mothman, but then I don't know. To me, it seems like this was edited by DC during the New 52 era, which just turned 10 recently. Like, there's no editorial continuity.
maybe it just hasn't happened yet.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
let's
and
retcon.
a lot of people say that it's not necessarily like a big tragedy that you would see like in like 9/11 or something like that. Sometimes it literally is one of those things where like an eyewitness, like somebody dies in their family. Like, I don't personally know if anything happened like that to these people because I just saw their stories that they reported and I didn't actually follow up with that.
Right, but okay, so cold water time. I think that some of the things that happens is that one of the reasons why we started this pod is we're trying to explain the inexplicable. So this is me in the X-Files as Scully, since I'm about the same height and also look great in a catsuit. One of the things that you would have to see is, I love that you both shook your heads yes, which is something that we'll have to talk about later, but we'll deal with that here. So, one of the things that happens is people engage in proportionality bias. So, when something that is so traumatic or so life-changing happens, they have to look for something bigger. And the Mothman tied to Point Pleasant in such a way because of the amount of sightings that are going on right up to the Silver Bridge disaster. It's a lot to take in there, and so it's very comforting to look into the weirdness that comes in over time. Now, another thing that's interesting about the X-Files, which is about to turn 30, and that's just a thing that I gotta deal with, the X-Files is great because it chronicles weird America, and at a time when small-town America was still pretty different. Like, I don't know about... Like, Ryan, growing up here, I'm curious what your thoughts are regarding small-town Massachusetts and any weirdness it may still have. But when Zack and I were growing up in Georgetown, Kentucky together, you would still have local legends. Like, apologies to my parents for finding out on this pod, but we and our mutual friends would go to the abandoned hospital together and just, like, rummage around. Just hanging out there because we could, and it was a place filled with stories and weirdness. I'm fine, by the way. The only time I fell on something, I only oozed for 5 days, parents. Anyways. So, yeah. The Point Pleasant stories and the Mothman stories, they're tied in a very romantic way to this small-town American idealism and these sort of local legends. But only over time, with the rise of the internet, do we begin to see these more connected Mothman stories. And that's one of the reasons why I like the idea of the Mothman as a local legend that ties in right there.
And no other person has ever said this, but it's very romantic to think about the 50s and 60s in the light of, the age of media had not progressed so much where, like, you can look something up and disprove it pretty quick. Because, like, even in 1952 with the Flatwoods Monster in a very similar area of West Virginia, only a couple years before Mothman, there were UFO sightings and people were met by the man called Indrid Cold, and the real-life Men in Black were visiting people. There was, like, nothing that could disprove these things, and if nothing else, it does what we do in times of hard times and tragedy, which is search for escapism. And if nothing else, for these people, like, the Mothman can certainly be that. It's really nice, honestly.
Yeah, I love that idea, too. The idea that we can escape in there. And, I mean, that's one of the reasons why, even though this is going to be cut out from the pod, y'all went into this very specific Nintendo rant at the beginning, because Nintendo has been about escapism. And let's not kid ourselves, the past 5 years have been rough for a lot of reasons in particular. And so Nintendo has this perfectly escapist platform, particularly with the Switch, where it's like, hey, bad things are everywhere. Fortunately, you can take your games and Mario, and Chris Pratt now voiced Mario anywhere.
Nope. Nope.
Yep.
Nope. Mm-hmm. Look. Okay. Look. All right. So I know. You're not on the Mothman train. I get it. That's okay. But listen to this though. So after the main couple reported it to the police, right? They actually went with the cop like a day or two later to like search the area. And they said while they were out there, the cop saw something soaring above them, right? And he said that his flashlight started messing up, and his also his CB radio thing started messing up to a point where it was almost unusable. And so there's like literally on the records the cops like being in the area where they think the Mothman is and confirming that tech doesn't work around it, which is a crazy idea.
Again, but it's very convenient, right? It's like, I saw the Mothman. Tech doesn't work around it. It's like, we can record everything. We can record, like, a presidential insurrection now, and people still won't believe it. We can even find shards of bamboo in failed election audits that happen. Okay, so why don't we?
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that it didn't. Look, I will say the same thing that I said in the Bigfoot episode, and I mean this with 100% certainty. A lot of people say this was a barn owl, right? And they're like, it looks like a barn owl. Like, when you look at its eyes, it glows like a barn owl when the light shines on it, you know? And the wings are around the same size. But the only issue is that a barn owl isn't 7 feet tall. And people know what a barn owl looks like because they live in that part of the country and they see them every single day. But these 4 people that saw the Mothman up close have such trauma based on it. The fact that, like, Linda, the person, Linda Scarberry, she literally had to take sleeping pills every single night. She said that she felt a sense of paranoia for the rest of her life, like something was staring at her and she could never find it. Everyone else that saw the Mothman, including her, will not go back into that area of the woods, and they never did again because they said it was so freaky and so real that they just couldn't ever get that out of their head. And people that know what owls look like don't see owls at night and have that reaction. That's not something that happens. And plus, the Men in Black don't visit for owls. Okay, that doesn't happen.
The 2 men, the father and son in Wisconsin, when they heard, this creature outside of their vehicle, they heard it shriek. They heard, some primal sound come out of it. Both men were cited as feeling disoriented, pulling over and, careening off the side of the road, and both of them opened their doors and vomited because they felt sick after hearing this creature, do what it did. And then they went back, like the first people did. They went back afterwards and they found a shredded deer carcass, like something that looked almost professionally and purposely done.
Not only that, but these people saw something and it shook them to their core. So while I'm saying, look, I'm not saying, think about it this way. It might not be the Mothman, but it was something. And it freaked out hundreds of people over the course of a year. And it was so bad that it became a part of the town's mythology. That's how crazy that is. And we just did an episode about MK Ultra, about the government doing experiments on people and spraying shit all over them and dosing people with LSD. So even if it was not a Mothman, it is not crazy to think that at this time they might have gotten a little bit of experimented on.
Right, but we're talking about in MK Ultra, the big thing that's there isn't just a government overreach and violation of trust. It's also the breaking of our ideals, and it comes out during the post-Watergate era when there's already no trust in American government anyway. So MK Ultra technically becomes part of a clearinghouse of bad American projects that occur so that we can build back better. Yeah, I know. I'm not happy with that one in there, but we'll keep it. Look, I like this. I mean, I don't agree with it because, again, the Mothman is you're changing understandings of biology and physics in this too. And I don't disagree that people experience something, but it's, again, proportionality bias, right? This thing that we can't understand, we put into schemas and stereotypes to help fit this idea. And again, this romantic idea that we can keep this place weird. Here, I'm going up to Salem next weekend just to go see wonderful New England tourism built around horrific incidents that occurred in real history too, and
that's really
the way
cool.
that it works. It's
cool.
very.
I've
cool.
always wanted to go to Salem.
You should come up.
Come on down.
Yeah, we can all 3 come in and record an episode right in the middle of Salem during tourist time. I'm sure that nothing bad will happen. Nothing. Ryan, you're a professional young person. Why do you think Mothman conspiracies and other conspiracies are so popular with younger individuals?
So honestly, I think it comes down to, that level of escapism that we're all searching for. We can get away with, film, television, video games, books, but if like something is so deeply rooted in the real world in a really romantic and connecting way, why not believe in it? There's part of me that wants to drive out to, the area of Bridgewater, Massachusetts, and just like camp out in the Bridgewater Triangle at night, because that is Lovecraft country, baby. But like, there's so much that, we can read a book, we can read Lord of the Rings, and we can get lost in it because, the words really envelop us, and we get, roped into that story, and we feel everything in that setting. But to be able to, drive my Ford Focus out to West Virginia and be able to, step on the grounds that something so extraordinary, and I mean that in the very literal extraordinary way, where things like that could have happened, it's really, there's something magical about it. And I think that's why a lot of people chase after things like Mothman, Bigfoot, the Jersey Devil, and other cryptids of the sort, especially around, my age, because, we don't have a whole lot else to do. We can't buy houses. So.
I feel like a boomer laughing at this. I mean, I'm not just like, I'm laughing with you, not at you. That's the thing. That was nicely done. Okay, and mean. And so, okay, you mentioned magic. What about your other podcast, Stories Unroll'd? For those that don't know, Ryan heads up a podcast and is the co-host of Stories Unroll'd, which is a game-based podcast. Do you ever put in any misinformation or anything current into your work to remain on point? Because I'm curious how you... it's obviously impossible for me to avoid discussing them, so much so that Zack and I made a pod about it. But how do you put misinformation into your work?
Honestly, so the way, as a, my role in our show right now for our current season is I am the game master, dungeon master, whatever you want to call it. 4 people on the other side of the table are collectively smarter than one of me. So I need to, as manipulative as it is, put out as much misinformation and red herrings as possible to lead them off of figuring out what I have going on. So it's like there's a level of misdirection that comes with designing a world where the characters in the story are reactive. Even in a very recent episode, I was trying to lead one of our characters, our sorcerer, our brave sorcerer, in a level of misdirection for him to, find out where one of his fellow party members left. And to my surprise, he spent 10 minutes misdirecting me, only to be spending those 10 minutes setting up a yo mama joke to burn my ass. So it's really... It's about just being, I use misdirection as a tool to make sure, the people on the other side, the characters who are rewriting the story with my hand, don't figure out what I actually have going on. So there's a level of mystery you can, use in a fantasy world, of course, but, misdirection and misinformation, as we've all found out over the last... expanse of humanity is a pretty dangerous thing, and I would not recommend it unless you're playing pretend with your buddies.
This is such a shame. With your communications media degree and that background, it makes you primed for Fox News, so, not that I'm going to write you a letter of recommendation for it, but it seems like you're ready for some programming.
Hey, man, I know you owe me one from that tenure letter, but not in that way.
Zack, let's just talk and wrap up the Mothman real quick. Like, when did you first encounter the the Mothman?
Personally?
Okay.
As he
No,
unzips his forehead.
Yes. Yeah.
God, that's
Light shines out. First time I heard of Mothman was in, well, to be honest with you, the first time I heard of it was that terrible Richard Gere movie.
Zach, one of the things that you coerced me into this pod was, like, there's a love for this material. And Ryan, you also have this too. With social media, why don't we hear more about the Mothman? Conspiracy theories make a comeback with social media in some way. With the COVID-19 pandemic, Pizzagate came back into the news when people were looking at the Wayfair catalog and then linking up people like Chrissy Teigen and Pizzagate and making these weird connections through TikTok. So what about the Mothman? Like, to me, it seems like video content like this would be easily passed around TikTok and later disseminated too. And this is actually a question that is going to go to you, Ryan. So why do you think that social media conspiracies worked so well together? It's like Reese's, right? It's like peanut butter and chocolate. Social media and conspiracies just go together.
Anyone can say anything. Anyone can stake a claim and can, based on any metric, could be grounded in reality. And it's both, social medias have been really pertinent and, helpful in a lot of ways. Like, recently in an industry I'm a part of, I'm a member of, like, the craft beer industry, like, working in it. And there was recently a huge Me Too sort of movement that spread like wildfire throughout the industry and actually got a lot of really nasty people fired, which is excellent. So there's stuff like that that's really helpful. But where it's not helpful is, when, a guy I graduated high school with who didn't pass biology is trying to fight people who are, medical professionals, staking claims in, I did my own research of, things as, important and dangerous as facts about COVID-19, the vaccine safety, anything like that. So it's really a double-edged sword, and where it falls is based on the wielder of the sword.
I can't thank you enough for saying that right there. That's exactly what I would hope an alum would say, and that makes me feel a lot better too. Zach, anything else that you want to talk about with the Mothman? Because you were pushing gung-ho for this. You kept badgering me with memes for the past week.
Oh no. Okay, it's back. Yeah, no, I thought my internet went out again. If anything, the Mothman is a harbinger of tragedy because my internet has been out since I've been researching it. Also, I also saw the Mothman yesterday before the Nintendo presentation, so that actually makes sense too.
Oh, God.
Look, I don't know. Mothman is that. Here's my thing. Like I said, I can't invalidate the fact that these people saw something. I can't invalidate the fact that they literally had PTSD for the rest of their lives. But I will say, it's Mothman's pretty far-fetched. It's hard to, at least with Bigfoot, there's like hair samples they can't place, and like Jane Goodall on the side of Bigfoot believers, but like there's nothing really to hold on to with Mothman. There's nothing, and that's disappointing. It's like a hollow treat.
You know what? If I ran to the Mothman, since he's part Al, he'd probably call me Eddie. And I'd call him Al.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's episode of Those Who Conspire.
Zach, I thought you hung up because your video went dark, and I was like, whoa.
Yeah, this is how the podcast ends, is ultimately with a disagreement over Paul Simon, which is ultimately the most boomer way that we can end this pod, if I can be honest.
I just quit just in the middle of an episode, and then edited it, and then released it. Like, that was it. That was the swan song.
Okay, as the non-murdering Phil Spector of this group, how else do you want to end it here?
I don't know, Ryan. Why don't you tell us what's the name of your podcast? Where can we find it?
Yeah, so I am one of the co-hosts of Stories Unroll'd. You can, and that's UNROLL''D, because I wanted to be clever. You can find us wherever you download podcasts, and we actually also have a Patreon where we publish exclusive content, and all of the proceeds we take from Patreon, we actually donate to charity. We are on track to donate around $1,200 to different charities across both locally and, across America this year. This quarter, we're actually donating to Fun Texas Choice, which in the wake of local things that are going on in terms of pro-choice in Texas are they help out with that. But yeah, that's what we do. We're friends. We tell stories and play tabletop role-playing games, and it's pretty cool. We're about to start season 2, so thank you guys so much for having me. Honestly.
No, thank you for coming in. Yeah, we're gonna definitely have you again, and we'd love to be a guest on your pod at some point if you'll have us too, because we have to return the favor.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a system called Monster of the Week, which is primed and ready for what this crossover could entail. So
all right,
I'd be more than happy to host.
That'd be really fun. By the way, Kyle, we should do that Patreon thing, but not the charity part.
Well, as always, this has been another fantastic episode of Those Who Conspire. Look for us soon on Stories Unroll'd for the Those Who Unroll'd crossover season. Until next time, I want to thank, again, Ryan Normile for coming by and talking to us about the Mothman. Zach, what else do we have coming up for Spooktober?
We have Roanoke, right?
Yes.
The Roanoke. We also have
feral people in national parks, yeah.
Feral people in national parks. I completely forgot. Yeah. I keep forgetting about that one. I need to do that research.
Yeah, we clearly need to come in and do that more too. And then I think we have one more special one that's coming up. So this October, keep your eyes and ears out for more spooky good times from us here at Those Who Conspire. Until next time, wait, hold on, no. Forgot. I need to tell you where you can find us on social media. Yeah, that's right. So, if you still use email and you sign into your old AOL address, you can find us on thosewhoconspire@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter. You can also reach us individually to tell us your Mothman stories. I'm at Kyle is Moody on Twitter and Instagram, and you can find Zack at Zack_Hightower on Twitter and at Real Hightower on Instagram. That's all for this week. Tune in next week because we're going to be disappearing into the Roanoke mist. And as always, I'm Kyle.
And I'm Zack.
And we thank you for listening to Those Who Conspire.
Bye.